I don't know. I just looked at the clock. It said 7.
Wait 2 minutes.
Yes.
Only because I don't trust cameras.
Mm-hmm.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 2 more and we're in actual people. Otherwise the Torah isn't going to do it. One more minute. Uno more. All right, I'd say let's go.
Yalla. Yai nai 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 yai nai 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 yai nai 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 yai nai 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 Yai nai 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 Yai nai 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 Yai nai 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 Yai nai 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 Yai nai yai nai nai Yai nai nai yai nai 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 Yai nai 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 Yai nai 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 Yai nai 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 nai
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat.
Welcome. Wonderful to see everyone here who is here and to know that there are some of you on the other side in live stream land. Welcome and Shabbat Shalom to you as well. It's wonderful, wonderful to see you. And together, in fact, tonight, we create the Kehillah Kdosha, the sacred community that we come together as one for Shabbat. It really warms the heart and makes it so much easier to peel away the hardened layers of everyday stresses to reveal the softer layer that reaches out to the majesty of Shabbat. It is something that we sorely need. And you know, this past week, we were reminded in a very concrete way that so much around us is not ever in our hands, but in the hands of the orchestrator of all things. And I speak, of course, of the huge fires that we have in our very own backyard, very close, winds that made everything much so more menacing. We were reminded that no matter how far we've come in so many ways, so much remains beyond us. And I do know that some of our own community have been close to the kind of devastation that we've heard about. Or maybe, I don't know, but maybe have been part of it. Please know that if you were, and if you're out there, we are with you. Hard to fathom how crushed one must feel when this kind of devastation hits. But as a Jewish community, our souls really are one. And your pain and your emotional fatigue and your anxiously seeking repair to come quickly, smoothly, we are together inside the divine embrace. That's the thing. And that last piece is kind of a reminder that there are certain things that remain in our hands. There is a lot that isn't in our hands, but some things are. And that is a decision to acknowledge that there can and should be a letting go and an accepting that there is a possibility of joy even in moments of acute sadness. It's there. But I wanted really for us as a community to do something together this evening. For those who have either been very close to what happened, but it didn't really happen, but they were this close, or people to whom it actually happened because we are one, there is a particular blessing I want us to say together. It is a blessing called Birkat HaGomel. In Yiddish, they refer to it as Benchen Gomel. The word Gomel means bestowing or awarding. And it is really a blessing that is said in our tradition whenever you have been saved from a close call. It could have been life and death, but wasn't. That you were saved. And so it's a blessing that you say. I've said it many times, and people say it very often if they have recovered from a severe illness. That is a very common time to do it. Or even just having come back from a big trip, you know, on airplane or whatever. God knows, whenever you're in an airplane, it is out of your hands, and you know you hope a lot. So and other situations such as that, you say the Gomel blessing. Now, it is very frequent that it is said when you're called up to the Torah, when you have an aliyah, but also you can say it as a community, as one. When a community has suffered something that was close and that was crushing and that was difficult. And I think that we should say the Gomel blessing together as a community today for those of our brothers and sisters who were in the area of the terrible fires. And what I think I'll do is we'll say it in English, and then I'll also say it in Hebrew, okay? And you will simply repeat after me, okay? So I think we should rise only because it's important and it's very meaningful. I think we shouldn't just be sitting for that, okay? So, and usually it is like the person who has been through it says, and then the congregation responds with a particular part of the blessing. But since we are today, both the ones who have experienced it and the congregation will say them both. So repeat after me. Blessed are you, Adonai our God.
Blessed
Blessed are you, Adonai, our God,
ruler of the world,
ruler of the world,
who rewards the undeserving with goodness,
who rewards the undeserving with goodness,
and who has reserved me or us with goodness.
who has reserved us with goodness.
After the recitation of this blessing, we'll say together the following words. May he who rewarded you with all goodness
May he who rewarded you with all goodness
will reward you with all goodness forever.
will reward you with all goodness forever.
And in Hebrew, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hagomel lechayavim tovot shegmalani kol tov. And the congregation would have responded, Mi shegmalcha kol tov, hu yigmalcha kol tov, Selah.
Amen.
Amen. And let us sit down. And so, we are here now to surrender to the serenity of Shabbat. Just surrender to it. Leaving heaviness and sadness at the door. Let's take a deep breath and send our spirits to that special Shabbat entrance, allowing the angels, Shabbat angels, who are manning those doors right now, to greet and embrace us with healing and unending love. So at this moment, I think what I usually will do, we've already done, and that is we've greeted one another and met one another. So once again, great to see everybody. There are few of us here, more of us out there. And so speaking of starting things on a brighter note, as you know, every holiday, we always begin with the bestowing of light upon things. And so we're going to light the candles now. Light is a very important thing in the Jewish religion, as you know. It's the first thing God created. If you go to Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, that's the first thing that was created, light. And that is a reminder that all darknesses are followed by light. So I will do that now. Don't worry, I will. Now the question is, will this work? Because I'm not good at it, but I see matches, which are more myself.
Atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat.
All right. So you heard me mention a moment ago that there were angels at the door. That's a beautiful midrash. Midrash is sort of a mythological teaching that our rabbis have bestowed upon us over hundreds of years ago. And one of the lovelier ones is that every Jewish person who goes to synagogue on Friday, on their return home, is accompanied by two angels. Every Jewish person has two angels. But you know, it's a nice midrash, but there's part of it that is, here's what it is. One is a good angel, and one is a not so good angel. I refer to that angel not so much as the wicked angel, but as the sourpuss. Because the way they tell it, they say, when they arrive at the person's home, if the home is fully prepared for Shabbat, you know, the table is set, the challah is there, the lights, we're ready to welcome Shabbat, the good angel bestows a wonderful Shabbat blessing on the home. And the thought is, to be honest, that almost every home they'd come into, it'll be like that. I mean, during the days of the rabbis who invented this midrash, that's how it was. But they say if they happen into a house where they weren't prepared, the sourpuss angel would snicker and say, aha, this home, I hope it continues to be this messy next week, and they don't get the blessing. Well, long ago, I have taken to interpret this midrash completely differently. My interpretation is this. If you gear your soul to open up to receive Shabbat, to receive the serenity of it, to receive the holiness of it, leaving the mundaneness of weekday behind, that act is an invitation and a preparation for Shabbat. That makes you fully prepared for Shabbat and therefore fully together with the positive, with the good angel, and therefore always would be accompanied by the good angel. And so all this is going to be brought to us in a musical version with Shalom Aleichem.
You can find Shalom Aleichem on page 7.
Thank you. Just
No
looking
problem.
for it.
Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech Malchei Amlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Boachem leshalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech Malchei Amlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Baruchuni leshalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech Malchei Amlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Zirchem leshalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech Malchei Amlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
By the way, this is Zachary Hoffman, who is helping us today with the music, doing beautifully. Thank you. So wonderful to have you with us,
Oh, there you
Zachary.
go.
And so next is a beautiful prayer which we've all sung many times and never tire of talking about its intent and its content, because it is a prayer of romance. It is the Lecha Dodi. And it is a prayer in which the people of Israel and God, right, together are likened to a bride and a groom. And so the Kabbalists, who are the mystics, you know, there's a big mysticism thing going on in Judaism called Kabbalah. And so the Kabbalists of the 16th century in the city of Tzfat in Israel, they decided to act out the drama of bride and groom, which they've been toying with for a long time as a way to welcome Shabbat. And so they went out into the field outside town, and they started to recite particular psalms, right? One particular psalm for each day. They are designated. They can also be found in the Siddur, in the prayer book. And they would turn toward the west, where the sun was setting, and they would sing the words, Boi Kala, which mean come bride, right? And they would conclude with Psalm 92 and 93, which is a Shabbat psalm. And as you can imagine, it started out having all kinds of versions of Lecha Dodi until it was crystallized to the version that we know now. And those are not things that took days or weeks or months. Those are things that took years, indeed generations. Ultimately, the version that was put together by a rabbi called Shlomo Halevi Alkabetz is the one that was decided upon. And the interesting thing is, you know, the Lecha Dodi has many verses. It is yay long. We don't ever do all the verses. I think if you go to a very Orthodox synagogue, you might hear all of them. But if you actually do all of them, the first letter of every verse together spells Shlomo Halevi Alkabetz, right? That was a particular form of poetry to write where the first letter of verses spells something, the message that you want to send. So Shlomo Halevi Alkabetz wanted to make sure that his name was there. So that was the version that was ultimately accepted and expected. Beautiful description of God and his people as bride and groom, very romantic and beautiful poetic lyrics. Sort of a semi-funny, interesting thing is, when the Shlomo Halevi Alkabetz version was accepted, there was some other version that another group of people liked better. You can imagine, you know, there are always arguments, right? And so that kind of back and forthing took a little bit of time. But, and I found that out from research, knowing that there were two versions that were different remains a known fact. And in Israel today, there are some synagogues that kind of as a reminder of the fact that there was a different way that maybe was liked by many, those synagogues who go not by the Shlomo Halevi Alkabetz, by the other way, when they do the Lecha Dodi, they have the person who sings that, who leads in that prayer, stand at a different pulpit than the main pulpit, does that prayer from there, and then goes back to the main pulpit to lead the rest of the service, just to show I like the other form. And so it always makes me giggle just a little bit. But right now, I invite us to embrace the thought of the romance of God, of people, and of people with people as we welcome Shabbat lovingly into our hearts, into our souls, with joy and with gratitude. And Lecha Dodi is found on what page?
18.
18. Thank you.
Lecha Dodi likrat kala, Pnei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, Pnei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, Pnei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, Penei Shabbat nekabela. Shamor וזכור בדיבור אחד. השמיענו אל המיוחד, אדוני אחד ושמו אחד, לשמו תפארת ולתחילה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לקראת שבת לכו ונלכה, כי היא מקור הברכה, בראש מקדם נסוכה, סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. התעוררי, כי באורך ומיורי, אורי, אשר דברי, כבוד אדוני אלייך נגלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה.
Please rise and face the door for the last verse.
בואי ושלום עטרת בעלה, גם בשמחה ובצלה, תוך אמוני עם סגולה, בואי כלה, בואי כלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה.
You may be seated again. This facing the door thing is to symbolically welcome the bride as she comes in. You know, at the wedding, remember when the bride comes in, we all stand up, right? So Shabbat bride just walked in. Just wanted again to say to either if someone here has just lost a loved one, or someone on the other side of the camera has lost a loved one, even though we are welcoming Shabbat with joy and with delight, as I said before, we are one with you. We welcome and understand your sadness and know that both in sadness and in joy, we are always one together. So the prayer service, whether evening or morning or holidays, always consists of sections. One of the more common ways the text transitions from section to section is by the recitation of the Chatzi Kaddish. That's sort of a section ender and a transition prayer. By the way, the word Chatzi means half because it's a tad shorter than the mourner's Kaddish, but it's really not half. But they just decided to use the word half. And it's what's interesting about the Chatzi Kaddish is that it's entirely in Aramaic, right? Not Hebrew at all. And it's really great as a transitional choice because it is a beautiful, enthusiastic listing of God's glorious attributes. It just lists in how many ways and why God is great, and why we love to extol God's greatness. It is just a great way to move from section to section. Our rabbis felt that no new section we should just jump into, dive into cold turkey, as if like a liturgical PowerPoint. You know, there's got to be some godly stuff going on as we go from section to section. So we need to know, of course, before whom we stand as we transition. And the very next prayer after the Chatzi Kaddish, the transition, is the official beginning of the service. It is the Barchu. That is the call to prayer, right? It is the official call to prayer, a verbal blast of the shofar, as if saying, come, come, right? So the section before that you heard, you know, the singing about the angels and the singing of Lecha Dodi about the bride, that's kind of the warm-up section, like the warm-up in a concert, right? And then the main thing begins with the Barchu. It is a call to prayer, and we demonstrate that now we are really ready for God, and we are here. We are present. And what better way to begin to show how present we really are than to remind ourselves of God, the Creator, Yotzer, right? God created everything, and God created everything by just speaking. Let there be light, let there be grass, let there be this. That was all, right? So God the Creator is the most logical continuation after transition, call to presence and prayer and holiness, and creation. According to a very well-known midrash, Adam and Eve, upon noticing how the sun always rose after the darkness of night, were the first ones to understand and recite some sort of a special gratitude toward God for creating light. And Judaism recognizes the sun is central to life. It's the sun that provides light for all life on earth. And we recognize that it is a reminder, as I mentioned earlier, no darkness is permanent. None. Every night is going to be followed by day. That's it. And that's part of what the prayer Yotzer, or God of creation, is talking about. So we can view this trio of prayers which are about to happen as a crescendo, like a evolving crescendo, starting modestly with the transition, God's attributes. We know who you are great. Getting bigger with a call to prayer, I'm here, I'm ready. And ending full force with light, life, and hope.
Yitgadal v'yitgadash Shemei Rabbah Be'alma divrach yiruteh v'yamlich malchuteh b'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'chayedecho Beit Yisrael Bagala bagala u'bizman karim v'meru amen Yesh Merabah Mevorach Le'alam Olam Me'amaya Yitbarach Yitbarach V'yishtabach V'yitvar V'yitroma V'yinaseh V'yitadar V'yitaleh V'yitalal Shemei Kudesha Barichu Le'elam Michover Chata V'shirata Tushbechata V'nechemata Damiram Be'alma V'meru Amen.
rise.
Yai lai lai, yai lai lai lai, yai la lai lai la lai lai, yai lai lai nai nai nai, yai nai 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 nai. Ya nai 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 nai, ya nai 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 nai. Baruch et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed. Yai nai 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 nai, yai nai 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 nai, yai nai 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 nai, yai nai nai nai, yai nai 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 nai, nai 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 nai. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bidbaro mariv aravim bechokma voteach sharim. God of creation, who makes the evening fall from light into darkness with the setting of the sun. You unfolded the heavens with brilliant moon and stars and wrap our souls with peace. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bidbaro mariv aravim bechokma voteach sharim. God of creation, who makes the evening fall from light into darkness with the setting of the sun. You unfolded the heavens with brilliant moon and stars and wrapped our souls with peace. Baruch atah Adonai Ha'ma'ariv aravim.
Well, you know, Shabbat is in so many ways all about love. And I know that I didn't tell you the pages before. I'm going to tell you the page for the next one, which is on page 27. And that's the prayer I'm going to talk about right now. It's Ahavat Olam. And that's a prayer that talks about God's love. And it's really nowhere clearer than in this prayer. It's in the Ahavat Olam and its twin prayer, which we say in the morning, which is called Ahavat Rabbah. And they're both talking about God's eternal and abundant love for people. And it is really a great cementer of the relationship that we always have together with God. And it, in a way, presents within the prayer God almost in a parental, like a father from whom we learn, who teaches, who does demand, as our parents do, they teach and then they want us to follow. God does have expectations, but then the rewards of if we follow them and knowing that God's love is with us at all times becomes the gift of gifts. And so many layers of love, give, return, learn, expect, reward, all those layers, they're all part of Ahavat Olam on page 27.
Ahavat Olam Beit Yisrael Amcha Avta Amcha Avta Torah u'mitzvot Ukim u'mishpatim Otanu limadeta Otanu limadeta Al kein Adonai Eloheinu v'shokfenu Ukumenu nasiach bechukecha V'nismach b'divrei Toratecha U'mitzvotecha le'olam va'ed Ki hem chayenu Be'orech yomeinu Uvahem negei yomam v'layla Negei yomam v'layla Va'avadcha al tasir Mimenu le'olamim Baruch atah Adonai Ohev amo Yisrael Ohev amo Yisrael.
Years ago, I was asked if I were to distill the definition of Judaism into its smallest component, what might it be? And my response was immediate. It was, Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Particularly the word Echad. That word alone distilled all of Judaism into itself. Echad meaning one. That's it. In olden days, in ancient days, there was actually a big deal to recognize and to stick to the oneness of the divine, because they were surrounded by much more attractive, much more fun, idol-worshipping faiths all over the place. Later on, until this very day, other traditions and faiths don't really entertain an echad as one, because there's always some other figure there. Sometimes the sun, sometimes, all kinds of other. And so, by the way, that adherence to the Echad, the one, has cost us dearly over the millennia in slaughters, in persecutions, right? In humiliation. But it's who we are. We are the adherents to the Echad. And that is why, and I've explained this before, I personally use this one line, the Shema, as a gateway, my personal gateway to personal prayer. You know, sometimes we utter prayers on our own. Oh, dear God, make this happen. Don't let the... So rather than dear God, I automatically first go into Shema Israel, and then I say what I have to say. It's the door opener, the gateway, you know? And it's, my father taught me that, my father who happened to have been a rabbi as well. And it's very comforting, and it's now second nature to me. And I think it's a great gate opener, because right away you explain, here I am, you know who I am, where I stand. That's why I'm chatting with you now. Okay? So, you are the one, is what I'm saying. And that's why I'm turning to you. Very comforting. Now, the Vahavta, which comes right after, which is not really a prayer, but it is an actual piece of Torah text lifted out of Torah and placed in the Siddur, in the prayer book. There are a few such things. We'll be running into another such prayer very shortly, right? But it is, again, very particularly part of the theme of love. Va'ahavta, just like ahavat olam, which we just heard, it comes from the same word, ahava, va'ahavta, right? And that is talking about how we are supposed to show our love and respect for our Creator. And it is very much about the relationship that we have together, right? God and us. And as we know, because we are humans, love relationships are not always easy, and they do not always slide forward smoothly. There are impediments on the road, obstacles, but we always work toward fixing. That's what we must do for the sake of the beauty of love and the object of our love. And here the two objects are God and His people. This is a relationship that is always worth fixing. Always. When things go awry and we wonder why, who, what, gotta fix it. Not for us to ask. You know, I told this story many times. I once sat at dinner together with Elie Wiesel, the great Elie Wiesel. And he said to me, and he could hate God if he wanted because of the concentration camp stuff, but he doesn't. He's a religious Jew. And he said, to me, God is simply the ultimate question mark. I know God is there. I know there is a divine higher power. But I don't understand it. It is too out there. I don't understand the characteristics. I don't know how it works. But for me, said he, it's just enough to know that that higher power is there. And I think that's such a great way to approach it, because that makes love always burn with a beautiful fire. So Shema V'ahavta, we are on page 29, for which we will rise, if that's your tradition. And then for the Ahavta, we'll sit down.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem, Kevod Malchuto, Leolam Va'ed.
Maybe seated. 31.
Ve'ahavta it Adonai Elohecha bechol levavcha uvechol nafshecha uvechol meodecha ve'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi metzavecha hayom al levavecha ve'shinantam levanecha ve'dibarta bam Beshitecha b'veitecha, uvlechtecha v'derech, uv'shachbecha, uv'kumecha, ukshartam leot al v'yadecha, v'hayu totafot bein einecha, uchtavtam al mezuzot veitecha, uv'hisharecha, leman tizkeru, v'asitem et kol mitzvotai, V'hitem kedoshim le'Elohechem, Ani Adonai Elohechem, Asher hotzeiti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim, Lihiyot lachem le'Elohim, Ani Adonai Elohechem, Adonai Elohechem emet.
So once again, we now have sort of a trio of prayers that will follow each other. We saw before, the first trio, there was a very nice interconnectedness, sort of a gentle progression that made them fit. And so we have, again, a kind of thread, and this time, some history connects them. It comes into play here. The first one, and the one that's next, is the Micha Mocha. That, by the way, will be found on page 37. And the Micha Mocha is that dazzling, joyous song and dance of gratitude and utter wonderment unfolding of the miracle of the Reed's Sea. By the way, I stress that it's the Reed's Sea, not the Red Sea. You're used to the Red Sea. But the Hebrew name of this sea is Yam Suf. The word Suf in Hebrew, in fact, the entire Torah, all you have to do is go and you'll find the entire story of Moses and the people and the miracle and da-da-da-da, and you know, Yam Suf, Reed's Sea. Had it said the Red Sea, the word for red is Adom. It ain't there. So it is simply a different body of water. Important to know. Okay, I say that to you so you don't think that somehow I don't know what I'm saying. That may explain also how the dryness happened and how, you know, it may explain some stuff. But a lot of people don't know that. A lot of people hear that and think that a mistake was made, that they meant to say Red Sea. No! Reed's Sea. So the Micha Mocha, when the miracle at the Reed Sea happened, and they were able to escape the Egyptian pursuers and win freedom after 400 years of suffering, of yearning, of hoping, right? But you have to understand, as you can imagine, 400 years of being slaves, I think part of the DNA that you inherit is inborn PTSD, inborn uncertainty and fear and oh my God, because you never know what the enslaver will do or come or demand or so on. And therefore, the next prayer after the Micha Mocha, which is the joyous dance and thank you, God, for letting us survive this and making this miracle happen, is the Hashkivenu. The Hashkivenu prayer envisions God as a shelter during the night and praises God for watching over us and delivering us and being merciful. And it's very profoundly comforting, really, to know that we can turn to God for this kind of basic human need that this prayer speaks about. We ask God to guard over us, to watch over us while we sleep. That first word, hashkivenu, the word itself means, please lay us down, leshalom, in peace. Because with the PTSD we've inherited, that is really what we need. And then within the prayer, it talks, of course, about ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha, which means, and spread over us a tabernacle of peace, which is absolutely the most really visual of a loving blanket put on a child. So it's laying down to sleep, being comforted with the warmth of protection and love. That is the hashkivenu. That's followed by what happened after the miracle at the Red Sea. What happened? They started to march through the desert. And the next great thing that happened soon thereafter was the incredible moment at Sinai, the revelation of all revelations, right? And one of the great moments of the 10 Commandments being given there is the commandment of Shabbat. On the seventh day, you will observe Shabbat because God created it, etc., etc., etc. And that is the Veshamru, which is the third prayer in this little trio that I'm talking about. It is not just that God says, okay, now, here, you got to keep Shabbat, because the wording of the Veshamru tells us that it's a contract. It is a contract. It says that the Veshamru is a contract between us and God. Us keeping the Shabbat every week reaffirms the signature of the contract and the unbroken relationship between us, the people, and God. And that is the Veshamru. It is a holy and sacred contract. Our job to guard it, to watch it, as God has guarded us when we needed to be guarded. And so it starts on page 37, and the other two will come shortly thereafter. So we start with the Mi Chamocha.
מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נדר בקודש, מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נדר בקודש. נורא תהילות אוסף אלה, נורא תהילות אוסף אלה, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. מלכותך ראו בניך בוקי הים לפני משה ומרים, זה אלינו ואמרו, זה אלינו ואמרו, אדוני ימלוך לעולם השכיבנו אדוני אלוהינו לשלום, לשלום, והעמידנו שומרנו לחיים. ופרוס עלינו סוכת שלומך, ופרוס עלינו סוכת שלומך. Amen. Shelter us beneath your wings, O Adonai. Guard us from all harmful things, O Adonai. Keep us safe throughout the night, until we wake with morning's light. Teach us, God, wrong from right. Amen. 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 Baruch atah Adonai, Hapores sukat shalom aleinu, ve'al kol amo Yisrael, ve'al Yerushalayim. Ve'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ביני ובין בני ישראל, אותי לעולם, אותי לעולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. וביום השביעי שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם.
We've arrived at the Amidah. Amidah means standing, the prayer which we say when we stand, and it has multiple blessings. And that's a prayer that was written somewhere in the 4th century BCE after Israel was exiled to Babylonia, and suddenly they didn't have a temple and they couldn't do sacrifices anymore, which was the way they were used to worship. And so something had to replace all that, and verbal prayers and songs started to replace, to show the people that you can still worship God even when you don't have a central temple in which you do your animal sacrifices. It starts beautifully with a small phrase, Adonai sfatai tiftach ufi yagid tehilatecha, which means, Adonai, open up my lips so that I can speak your praise, which is just a gorgeous way of surrendering to God and saying, you know, God, I got to surrender to you for my lips to be able to say how great you are, because I myself couldn't do it on my own. And then we just go into different blessings. One talks about our patriarchs, and then various and sundry other things, talking about various parts of life and living. The weekday Amidah is much longer. It has 18 or 19 blessings. The Shabbat one only has 7. It is usually said standing up and facing the ark. For us, it's going to start on page 45, and you'll be asked after Zachary will chant the first couple out loud. The rest of them you'll say on your own silently, and you'll end on page 59. And when you're done, you'll sit down.
Adonai sefatai tiftach ufi agid tehilatecha. Baruch ata Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, ve'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, ve'Elohei Leah. Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor v'Hanora El Elyon Gomel Chasadim Tovim Vekoneh Hakol Vezocher Chasdei Avot ve'Imahot Umevi Geula Lifnei V'nehem Leman Shemo Be'ahava Melech Ozer U'Moshia U'Magin Baruch Ata Adonai Magin Avraham Ve'ezrat Sarah Ata Gibor Le'Olam Adonai Mechayeh Kol Ata Rav Lehoshia Morid Hatal Mechalkel Chaim Bechesed Mechayeh Hakol Berachamim Rabim Somech Noflim Verofech Oholim Umatir Asurim Umekayem Emunato Lishenei Afar Micha mocha bal gevurot umido melach melech memitz umechaye umatmiach Yeshua v'neman ata l'chayot hakol baruch ata Adonai mechaye hakol ata kadosh v'shimcha kadosh u'kadoshim v'chol yom yahalu chasela baruch ata Adonai ha'el hakadosh. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Ki atahu melech adon lechol hashalom. Ki atahu melech adon lechol hashalom. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. V'tov einecha levarech et Amcha Yisrael v'chol עת ובכל שעה בשלומך. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Tasim Leolam. Tasim Leolam. Baruch atah Adonai Hamvarech et amo Yisrael Bashalom.
So let's talk Torah for a moment or two. We're deep in the book of Leviticus, the book of Vayikra, a book very meager on story narrative, almost none at all, while having close to non-stop rules, regulations, laws, and instructions. As I was preparing to speak to you tonight, I found my mind going in two directions. A general one, sort of about the entire book of Leviticus, and a specific one straight out of this week's Torah portion, which happens to be a parsha called Emor. So luckily and happily, the general and the specific turned out to be a great complement to one another, and they fit hand in glove with each other, creating a pretty powerful message that I want to share with you this evening. So the first reflection was general. I thought about the fact that in the early part of Leviticus, almost in the beginning, it says, God gave these words to Moses at the tent of meeting. And by the way, the tent of meeting was what they called the desert tabernacle. You know, when they were wandering around, they built a tent, and that was the sanctuary. That was called the tent of meeting. Now, toward the end of the book of Leviticus, similar words appear, which say, God gave these words to Moses at the top of Mount Sinai. A contradiction. Tent of meeting, Mount Sinai, which was it? And as you can imagine, our rabbis who love to debate heaped a lot of explanations on this seemingly contradictory statement. And yet I, in reflecting on this issue, kept holding fast to an idea which I always loved. I always gravitated toward. And it's been a huge comfort to me throughout my entire life. And that is the notion that Sinai is not just a geographic location, a place. That when God reveals him, herself to you, when God is somehow feelable, palatable, wherever we are, any place, any time, when an event happens, something occurs that we can tell is divinely inspired, that's you standing at Sinai. That's a Sinai moment. And this can and does happen to us several times in our lifetime, to have these moments when we know that somehow God was involved right there. A personal Sinai moment. All kinds of beautiful scenes like this happen in a lifetime. They are timeless. They are memorable. And sometimes hard to explain. That is how we recognize the presence of the question mark, that divine higher power. So I was feeling all this wonderfulness as I was reading this week's Parsha to prepare, Parashat Emor. And upon reaching its last few paragraphs, I encountered actually one of the few story narratives found in the entire book of Leviticus. It is a story about a man who is the son of an Egyptian man and an Israelite woman, a mixed marriage. He gets into a bitter fight in the middle of the camp in the desert with an Israelite guy. At the end of this very heated exchange, this half Israelite, half Egyptian man takes God's name in vain. He blasphemes. Oi is all one can say. The people who witnessed this are in shock because they're keenly aware of the strict prohibition against such behavior. And so they put the man under guard. It's all part of the text. Bring him to Moses asking, what shall we do? Moses, as he often does, turns to God and asks. God, in turn, does respond. God says to Moses, take him outside the camp. Everyone who has heard him speak those sinful utterances must lay hands on him, and then the entire community must stone him. Boy, this is a hard story to read. Not a pleasant story to read. A tough one to contemplate. You wonder how much damage could this really have done to God? I mean, God is God. God will be okay. So why this severity? So you end up concluding, surmising, that because of the severity of this decree, there must be multiple layers to be considered here. And an important clue is found in actually last week's Torah portion, in which the matter of taking God's name in vain is discussed. And the emphasis is on name. It isn't God as a divine entity that is being harmed, but God's name. That's because, as we know and understand, especially then, it is God's name that is publicized and spread amongst the nation. As Jews who gave the world, taught the world about the one God, the Echad. It is by definition, therefore, our task to guard the name and its reputation. That job was given to us at Sinai. If name and or reputation are diminished, they would inevitably diminish trust in and desire to partner with a diminished God. And logically and understandingly, it would diminish us and our own name and reputation as originators and teachers of the Echad, the One. So layers of faith and of holiness, layers of clout, layers of religious cachet, if you will, would forever be compromised for God and for us. And so emerges, I guess, the layer most relevant to us today, the layer of teaching something, and that is when besmirching another person with foul name-calling, we end up diminishing our own self-worth. So the message this uncomfortably harsh story conveys to us is this: settle your arguments with language that is never less than respectful, so that you yourself don't defile the peace of God, the divine spark that resides inside each of us, as we know. It's up to us to make that choice, to understand that, to know that, to determine that, to adopt that value with definitive intent. That spark waits for us to tap it and shove aside the heat of passion stuff and the I just snapped. That shouldn't be part of how we live life. Because words, as I said in the beginning of the evening, have extreme power. Words created the world. Words can be everything. In our specific story, in Emor, we are not told, by the way, the exact cause of the fight between the two guys. And so our rabbis, as usual, came up with a story. And the one that is the most accepted one is that the half-Egyptian, half-Israelite man saw himself, because of the side of his father, right, that he was part of the tribe of Dan. He therefore wanted to pitch his tent together with the tribe of Dan. You know, all the tribes pitched their tents in different areas. But the Danites, because he was half and half, said, no, there is no place here for you. And that, my friends, as we know, is bad for obvious reasons. Let me just remind you, in the Torah, God says over and over again, there must be one law for the stranger and for the citizen alike. One law. Treating the stranger respectfully is your responsibility, but the tribe of Dan ignored that, and that became a fight. And therein lies the other powerful message handed to us by Parashat Emor. If we make sure to give respect rather than rob people of it, there really won't be as many incidents of animosity. People who feel like they belong and have a home don't feel like outsiders. So this parasha turns out to be for us a call to compassion to those who seek a sense of belonging and a home, a call to help ease and diminish the suffering, to exercise kindness, which is part of the divine spark inside us, inside our soul. All we need to do is hear it. The spark is there. We must not ignore it. It urges us to care in thought and in act. And that will, all by itself, every time we do that kind of caring, will be a personal Sinai moment for us. An indelible, real, deeply meaningful moment, just like standing on top of the mountain. So let's decide right now that this be our new way of setting life affirming goals, stitching together a golden string of gem-like personal Sinai moments from now on, moments that can come anywhere, anytime in our lives and in our actions, moments where we decide to care. That's it. What a wonderful way to be part of the grandeur of then and the wonderful possibilities of now. Shabbat Shalom. And so the moment has come to say a prayer for those who need some immediate healing. It is the Misheberach, and it is a prayer that we say for those who need healing of body, healing of soul, any kind of healing. We all do in some way or another, some more urgently than others. But this prayer, it evokes the names of our matriarchs and patriarchs to kind of remind God that we have very good pedigree. So please, please heal. And it is usually said as a community, because we do, as we just said, care for each other. After which we will end the formal part of our service, as we have begun as a community, with what we call the Aleinu prayer, which is a prayer in which, once again, we praise God. So we're asking God to heal, but we're reminding God, we know who you are. We know how great you are. And the final word of the Aleinu happens to be Echad, where we remind God we definitely know who you are. If you have someone for whom you wish the Misheberach, the healing prayer, to be sung, you can say their name out loud right now. And I say the name, I said the same to those of you who are on the other side of the camera. You can call the name out into your own living room, and this will be for them as well. And we will rise and remain risen for the Misheberach and the Aleinu.
Misheberach Avotenu Mekor HaBracha Leimotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, Help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Mi sheberach imotzeinu mekor habracha leavotzenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. Aleinu leshabeach ladon hakol, latiknu laliotzer breshit, shelo asanu kiroye aratzot, velo samanu kimishpechot ha'adama, shelo sam chelkenu kahem, וגורלנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד.
All right. Now, if you'd like to help me take this out of here.
Gladly.
I need a tech assistant. He is my tech assistant. Thank you. We have come to the remembering of those among us who have passed. Those who have passed within the past 30 days. So we recall the loved ones whom death has recently taken from us. Shirley Seidman, mother of Rabbi Ben-Zion Seidman. And we recall with great love and sadness the following people whose yahrzeits are celebrated this week. Beatrice Alon, Morton Brill, William Hillman Briskin, Miriam Brown, Benjamin Chait, Dorothy Koblenz, Madison Cornwell, Dina Duhan, Sherwood Fine, Martin Fells, Muriel Fisher, Harriet Goldman, Lily Goldstein, Gilbert Harris, Irving Corson, Esther Kramer, Gustav Laroe, Marja Lysek, Rose Margolis, Jack Joshua Margolis, Carolyn Marr, Marilyn Melman, E. Harris Nober, Bessie Orenstein, Cheryl Persky, Ludmila Patushk, Ben Plucker, Nathan Price, Sarona Lottie Rimon, Golje Rudolph, Eleanor Subsevitz, Clara Sholnick, Mordechai Sella, Kate Shapiro, Michael Silva, Marcy Silverstein, Jeanette Simon, Donald Steinberg, Frida Steinberg, and Nelson Sagalski. And we are going to read the Mourner's Kaddish now. If it is your tradition not to stand, you're welcome to sit. I want you to know why I always stand, even if it's not a yahrzeit of one of my loved ones. And that's because I always figure that among the 6 million who have been butchered, there are always some for whom no one is ever there to say Kaddish, and we don't know when they might have perished. And so I always stand, always, figuring I'm honoring someone who may have no one. This is on page 73. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, בעלמא דברה חירותי וימליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן. יהא שמי רבה מבורך לעולם ולעולמי עולמיה. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו. לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה דאמירן בעלמה ואמרו אמן. יהא שלמה רבה מן שמיה, וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. זיכרונם לברכה. Okay, let's see what happens next. We have here. Oseh Shalom, and that you get to read.
You can be seated if Shula says you can.
Yes, you totally can and should.
Oseh Shalom Bimroma, Uyaseh Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael, Ve'al Kol Yoshvei Tevel, Ve'imru Amen. Yana na 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 yana yana na yana na 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 yana na yana na 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 yana na 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 yana yana na yana na 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 yana na yana na 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 Oseh Shalom bimromav Uyaseh Shalom aleinu Ve'al Kol Yisrael, Ve'al Kol Yoshvei Tevel, Ve'imru Amen. Alrighty, and there are some upcoming events at Bethel. Information on all of our events can be found on our website and in our emails. Torah study meets in person for the first time in 2 years tomorrow at 9 a.m. It continues to simultaneously be on Zoom. Join us tomorrow, May 14th at 9:15 a.m. for Saturday morning conservative service. Register now for the program called Can We Talk?, which is a program about understanding and overcoming polarization in a time of division. Sorry, there's a sentence. In a time of division with Sasha Bonder of One America and Rabbi Kvod. That event will be happening on May 17th at 7 p.m. We invite you to register today for the virtual launch of Every Vote campaign on May 17th at 5 p.m. Join us for Friendship Across Difference, an interfaith discussion on talking to one another in these polarized times on Thursday, May 19th at 7 p.m. And please register now for Comedy Night on June 11th to take advantage of early bird pricing. And with that, I wish you a Shabbat Shalom.
And so before I send you home, we're going to do a quick Kiddush and Hamotzi, because as you know, every Shabbat and every holiday is punctuated by celebrating with wine. Wine, as lights, are symbols of joy. So I invite you to stand And join me if you want or can. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, בורא פרי הגפן. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר קידשנו במצוותיו ורצה בנו, ושבת קודשו באהבה וברצון הנחילנו, זיכרון למעשה וראשית. כי הוא יום תחילה למקראי קודש, זכר ליציאת מצרים. כי בנו בחרת ואותנו קידשת מכל העמים, בשבת קודשך באהבה וברצון הנחלתנו. ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת. Amen. I took a pretend sip. It's because I don't do wine. Join me for Hamotzi. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, המוציא לחם מן הארץ. Amen. As I invite you all to come here and tear a piece, this is a challah. There's nothing more delicious on this planet than challah. So come and tear. I want to thank Zachary. Thank you so much. It's been lovely working with you. Love for welcoming Shabbat together. Ladies and gentlemen, Shabbat Shalom, Toda Rabba. Come get yourself a nice piece of challah. Shalom.